The blood had already frozen on her torn nightgown when Violet Ashford's bare feet hit the snow-covered ground outside Placerville, California. And she knew if she stopped running for even a moment, Marcus would find her, and this time he would finish what he started. The winter of 1872 had brought an unusual blizzard to the Sierra Nevada foothills, transforming the gold rush town into a white wilderness that swallowed her screams and footprints alike as she fled through the darkness. Her lungs burned with each gasping breath, the frigid air slicing through her throat like shattered glass, but the pain in her chest was nothing compared to the terror that propelled her forward through the pine trees. Behind her, somewhere in that suffocating darkness, she could hear men shouting, their voices carrying across the frozen landscape like the howls of wolves closing in on wounded prey. She had been running for what felt like hours, though it could have been minutes. Time losing all meaning when survival became the only thought occupying her mind. The gambling hall where Marcus had kept her locked away for the past 2 years stood somewhere behind her now, that prison of red velvet curtains and cigar smoke where she had been forced to smile and pour whiskey for men who looked at her like she was something to be bought and used. Tonight, when Marcus had come to her room with that look in his eyes and his hands reaching for her throat, something inside her had finally broken free. She had grabbed the oil lamp from her bedside table and smashed it against his head, and in the chaos of flames and his enraged screaming, she had run. Now the snow was so deep it reached past her ankles with each stumbling step, and she could no longer feel her feet at all. Her thin nightgown provided no protection against the biting wind that whipped through the forest, and she knew with a terrible certainty that she would die out here in this frozen wilderness. But even death seemed preferable to going back to that place, to Marcus and his cruelty, to the life that had stolen everything from her since the day her father had gambled her away to pay his debts. The ground suddenly gave way beneath her, and she found herself tumbling down a steep embankment, her body rolling through snow and rocks until she crashed into something solid at the bottom. Pain exploded through her shoulder and ribs, and she lay there gasping, unable to move, unable to think beyond the agony radiating through her frozen limbs. Above her, she could still hear the voices of Marcus's men, their torches flickering like distant stars through the falling snow. She tried to push herself up, but her arms buckled beneath her weight. The world was spinning, darkness creeping in at the edges of her vision, and she realized with a strange sense of calm that this was where her story would end. 23 years old, and she would become just another nameless body found in the spring thaw, another forgotten soul claimed by the unforgiving West. Then she heard the horse. The sound of hoofbeats approached through the snow, steady and purposeful, and Violet felt her heart seize with fresh terror. They had found her. Marcus had found her. She tried to crawl away, her fingers clawing uselessly at the frozen ground, but her body refused to obey her anymore. Easy now. The voice was deep and gentle, nothing like the harsh tones she had expected. I am not going to hurt you. Strong hands lifted her from the snow as if she weighed nothing at all, and she found herself looking up into a face she could barely make out in the darkness. All she could see were eyes, dark and serious, studying her with an intensity that should have frightened her, but somehow did not. "You are safe," he said, and something in the way he spoke those words made her believe him. She tried to speak, to warn him about Marcus and the men who were hunting her, but her teeth were chattering so violently she could not form the words. The cowboy wrapped something warm around her, a heavy coat that smelled of leather and pine smoke, and then he was lifting her onto his horse. "We need to move," he said quietly, swinging up behind her. His arm came around her waist, holding her secure against his chest, and she could feel the steady beat of his heart through the layers of fabric between them. "Can you hold on?" She managed a small nod, her frozen fingers gripping the saddle horn as the horse began to move. The motion should have jarred her injured body, but he guided the animal with such skill that the ride felt almost smooth. Behind them, the voices of her pursuers were growing louder, and she tensed in his arms. "They are looking for you," he observed, his breath warm against her ear. "Please," she managed to whisper through her chattering teeth, "do not let them take me back." His arm tightened around her protectively. "No one is taking you anywhere you do not want to go." They rode through the forest in silence after that, the horse picking its way through the snow with sure-footed confidence. Violet drifted in and out of consciousness, the cold having seeped so deep into her bones that she felt disconnected from her own body. She was aware of the cowboy's presence behind her, solid and warm, the only thing anchoring her to the world. Once, when she started to slip sideways, his grip tightened immediately, pulling her back against him. "Stay with me," he said, his voice cutting through the fog in her mind. "We are almost there." She did not know where there was, but she trusted him in a way that defied all logic. Perhaps it was simply that she had no other choice, or perhaps it was something in his voice, a fundamental decency that she had almost forgotten existed in men. The cabin appeared suddenly through the swirling snow, a solid structure of rough-hewn logs with smoke rising from its chimney. The cowboy dismounted in one fluid motion, then reached up to lift her down. Her legs buckled the moment her feet touched the ground, and he caught her easily, sweeping her up into his arms. "I have you," he said simply, and carried her inside. The warmth of the cabin hit her like a physical force, and she gasped as sensation began to return to her frozen limbs. The pain was immediate and intense, a burning agony that made her cry out. The cowboy set her down gently in a chair near the fireplace, then began working quickly to remove his coat from around her shoulders. "This is going to hurt," he warned, kneeling before her. "Your feet need to be warmed slowly." She looked down and saw for the first time the condition of her feet, blue-white and covered in blood from cuts she had not even felt. The sight made her dizzy, and she had to look away. "What is your name?" he asked, his hands gentle as he began to examine her injuries. "Violet," she whispered. "Violet Ashford." He glanced up at her, and in the firelight she could finally see him clearly. He was perhaps 25 or 26, with strong features weathered by sun and wind, dark hair that fell past his collar, and those eyes that seemed to see straight through to her soul. There was a quiet strength about him, a steadiness that made her feel safe for the first time in years. "I am Kieran Nash," he said, "and you do not need to be afraid anymore, Violet Ashford." He moved around the cabin with practiced efficiency, gathering supplies, heating water, finding clean cloths and bandages. As he worked, Violet watched him, trying to understand what kind of man would risk himself for a stranger running barefoot through a blizzard. Most men she had known would have either ignored her plight entirely or seen it as an opportunity to take advantage of her vulnerability. "Why did you help me?" she asked quietly. Kieran paused in his work, a pot of water in his hands. "What kind of question is that?" "An honest one. You do not know me. I could be anyone, running from anything. Why would you put yourself in danger for me?" He set the pot on the iron stove to heat, then turned to face her fully. "I know enough. I know you were running barefoot through the snow in a nightgown in the middle of a blizzard. I know someone hurt you badly enough that you would rather freeze to death than go back to them. And I know that no woman deserves whatever was done to you." His jaw tightened. "That is all I need to know." Tears burned in Violet's eyes, the first she had allowed herself to shed in longer than she could remember. She had learned years ago that crying only made Marcus angrier, that showing weakness was an invitation for more pain. But here, in this warm cabin with this steady-eyed stranger, something inside her cracked open. "They will come looking for me," she said, wiping at her eyes with shaking hands. "Marcus owns half of Placerville. He has men everywhere. When he finds out you helped me, then he will find out I am not a man who gives up easily," Kieran interrupted calmly. He brought a basin of warm water over and knelt before her again. "This may hurt. I need to clean these wounds." She nodded, bracing herself. The first touch of the warm cloth against her frozen feet was excruciating, and she had to bite her lip to keep from crying out. Kieran worked with as much gentleness as possible, but there was no way to make it painless. Through it all, he talked to her in that quiet, steady voice. "I have a ranch about 10 miles north of Placerville," he said, carefully cleaning the blood and dirt from her feet. "Been working it for 3 years now since I came out from Kansas. It is not much yet, but the land is good and the cattle are healthy. I've been building it up slowly, doing it right." "Why are you telling me this?" Violet asked through gritted teeth. "Because I want you to know that you have options. You do not have to go back to wherever you came from. There is work that needs doing on a ranch, and you could stay as long as you need to figure out what comes next." She stared at him, unable to comprehend such kindness from a stranger. "You would let me stay here, just like that?" Kieran looked up at her, his expression serious. "Just like that. Though I should tell you the nearest neighbor is 5 miles away and I do not get to town much. It would be a quiet life, at least for a while. But you would be safe and you would be free. No one tells you what to do. No one puts their hands on you unless you want them to." "I do not understand you," she whispered. "Why would you do this?" He returned his attention to her feet, wrapping them carefully in clean bandages. "My sister was in a situation like yours once. Different circumstances, but the same kind of trapped. By the time I found out and got to her, it was too late. She had already decided that death was better than one more day of what she was enduring." His hands stilled on the bandages. "I was 17 years old, and I held her while she died. And I swore that if I ever had the chance to help someone in a similar situation, I would not hesitate. So that is why, Violet Ashford, that is why I am doing this." The cabin fell silent except for the crackling of the fire. Violet felt tears streaming down her face now, unchecked and uncontrolled. All the fear and pain and loneliness of the past 2 years came pouring out of her, and she found herself sobbing into her hands while this stranger who had saved her life finished tending her wounds. When he was done, Kieran stood and moved to the other side of the cabin, giving her space to compose herself. He poured coffee from a pot on the stove and brought her a cup, the warmth of it seeping into her frozen hands. "Drink," he said gently. "It will help." She sipped the strong, bitter coffee and felt it burn down her throat, chasing away some of the cold that had settled in her core. Slowly, her sobs quieted, and she was able to breathe again without gasping. "I am sorry," she said quietly. "For what?" "For falling apart like that, for being weak." Kieran pulled up another chair and sat across from her, his own coffee cup cradled in his hands. "There is nothing weak about surviving what you have survived. There is nothing weak about running barefoot through a blizzard to escape a bad situation. You are one of the strongest people I have ever met, Violet, and I have only known you an hour." She looked at him then, really looked at him, and saw nothing but sincerity in his face. It was such a foreign experience being seen as strong rather than broken that she did not quite know how to respond. "Tell me about Marcus," Kieran said after a moment. "Tell me what we are dealing with." So she did. Haltingly at first, then with increasing steadiness, she told him everything. She told him about her father, a gambler who had loved cards more than he loved his daughter, who had accumulated debts he could not pay. She told him about the night Marcus Brennan had come to their small house on the edge of Placerville, offering to clear her father's debts in exchange for Violet. She told him how her father had agreed without even looking at her, how she had been just 21 years old and terrified. She told him about the gambling hall Marcus owned, about how he had put her to work there serving drinks and looking pretty for the customers. She told him about the rules, the endless rules about how she had to dress and speak and smile, about how any infraction was met with punishment. She told him about the locked room upstairs where she had been kept, about how Marcus had told her she belonged to him now, that she was his property to do with as he pleased. "Tonight was not the first time he tried to hurt me," she said quietly, staring into her coffee cup. "But it was the first time I thought he might actually kill me. I saw it in his eyes, so I fought back, and I ran, and I did not look back." Kieran's knuckles were white around his coffee cup, and there was a hardness in his eyes that had not been there before. "This Marcus Brennan, I know the name. He runs the Silver Dollar Gambling Hall. That is him. He has a reputation as a dangerous man, connected to some of the rougher elements in the territory. Kieran set his cup down. He will come looking for you. He cannot let someone escape him like that without it damaging his reputation. I know, Violet said, fear creeping back into her voice. That is why I should leave. I should not have let you bring me here. I am putting you in danger. You are not going anywhere in this blizzard, Kieran said firmly, and even when the snow clears, you are not going anywhere until you are healed and have somewhere safe to go. I meant what I said, Violet. You are safe here. But Marcus can come try to take you if he wants. He will find out I'm not easy to intimidate. There was something almost dangerous in Kieran's voice now, a hint of steel beneath the gentleness. I have dealt with men like him before. I can handle it. Violet wanted to argue, wanted to insist that she should not let him risk himself for her, but the truth was she had nowhere else to go. No money, no family, no friends who would help her. This stranger with his kind eyes and steady hands was the only hope she had. I will earn my keep, she said quietly. I can cook and clean. I can help with the ranch work. I will not just be a burden. You are not a burden, Kieran said. You are someone who needs help. There is a difference. He stood and moved to a trunk in the corner, pulling out some clothes. These were my sisters. She was about your size. They should fit you well enough until we can get you some proper things. He handed her the bundle of clothes, then turned his back to give her privacy. There is a bedroom through that door. You should get some rest. We can figure everything else out in the morning. Violet stood on shaking legs, clutching the clothes to her chest. Kieran? He turned to look at her, his face half in shadow from the firelight. Thank you, she said simply, for everything. He nodded once. Get some rest, Violet. You're safe now. She limped to the bedroom and closed the door, then changed out of her torn, blood-stained nightgown into the soft flannel shirt and thick wool skirt he had given her. The clothes smelled faintly of lavender and felt like a luxury after years of wearing the revealing costumes Marcus had forced on her. She crawled into the bed, pulling the quilts up to her chin, and for the first time in 2 years she fell asleep without fear. In the main room, Kieran sat by the fire and loaded his rifle, his eyes on the door and his mind on the men who would eventually come. He had meant every word he said to Violet. She was safe here, and he would make sure she stayed that way no matter what it cost him. The blizzard raged for 3 days. During that time, Violet and Kieran existed in a strange kind of suspended reality, trapped together in the cabin while the snow piled up outside and the wind howled through the pines. At first, Violet was cautious around him, flinching when he moved too quickly, keeping her distance. Years of living under Marcus's control had taught her to be wary of men, to expect pain and manipulation behind every kind gesture. But Kieran was patient. He never pushed her, never demanded anything from her. He went about his daily routine of tending the fire, cooking meals, checking on the horses in the small barn attached to the cabin, and he let her set the pace of their interactions. Slowly, Violet began to relax. She started helping with small tasks, peeling potatoes for stew, folding blankets, sweeping the floor. Normal, everyday things that felt almost revolutionary after being treated like property for so long. On the second day, as they sat by the fire eating breakfast, Kieran asked, "What did you do before Marcus?" Violet paused, her spoon halfway to her mouth. No one had asked her about herself in so long that she almost did not know how to answer. I helped my mother run a boarding house before she died. I was good at it too. Managing the accounts, making sure everything ran smoothly. I had plans to expand, to make something real out of it. Her voice grew bitter. Then my mother passed and my father started gambling and everything fell apart. You have a head for business then, Kieran said thoughtfully. I suppose. Not that it matters much now. It matters. That kind of skill does not just disappear. He stirred his coffee. A ranch is a business too. Someone has to manage the accounts, track the cattle, plan for the seasons. I could use someone with that kind of knowledge. Violet looked at him sharply. You are offering me a job? I am offering you a partnership if you want it. This ranch has potential, but I am better with cattle and horses than I am with numbers and planning. You could help me build something here, something good. And in return, you would have a place that is yours where no one can take anything from you ever again. Why? She asked, the question that kept haunting her. Why are you being so kind to me? Kieran was quiet for a long moment, staring into the fire. When my sister died, I felt helpless. I felt like I had failed in the most fundamental way possible. I could not save her, could not protect her. He looked at Violet then, his dark eyes intense. Maybe I'm being selfish. Maybe helping you is really about trying to make peace with what happened to her, but I do not think so. I think sometimes people come into our lives exactly when they're supposed to, and we have a choice. We can turn away and pretend we did not see someone who needs help, or we can step up and do what is right. I am choosing to do what is right. What if I am not worth it? Violet asked quietly. What if I am too broken to fix? You are not broken, Kieran said firmly. You are bent, maybe, scarred, definitely, but not broken. I see a woman who had the courage to fight back against a man twice her size, who ran barefoot through a blizzard rather than give up her freedom. That is not broken. Violet, that is iron strong. She felt tears prick her eyes again, but blinked them back. I do not feel very strong. Strength is not about how you feel. It is about what you do despite how you feel. He stood and collected their bowls. Think about my offer. No pressure, no strings attached. Whether you stay here or move on once you are healed, I will help you however I can. But if you do stay, it would be as an equal partner, not as hired help or anything less. The idea was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. A life where she was not property, where she had agency and control, where she could build something with her own hands and mind. It seemed almost too good to be true, which made her suspicious. What did Kieran really want from her? As if reading her thoughts, he said from where he stood at the wash basin, I know you have no reason to trust me. I know that trusting any man probably feels impossible right now. So I will make you a deal. When this storm clears, I will take you into Sacramento if you want. I have a friend there, a woman named Catherine who runs a boarding house for women in difficult situations. She can help you find legitimate work, a safe place to stay, connections to people who can help you start over. You do not have to stay here if you do not want to. You have options. That was what finally began to crack through Violet's defenses. The fact that he was offering her a way out, not trying to trap her here. He was giving her choices, real choices, maybe for the first time in her life. Okay, she said quietly. He turned to look at her. Okay, what? Okay, I will think about your offer about staying and being partners. She met his eyes. But I need you to understand something. I do not know if I can ever be what you might want me to be. Marcus, he did things, and I do not know if I can ever let anyone close to me that way again. Kieran crossed back to where she sat and crouched down so they were at eye level. Violet, I am not offering you this partnership because I expect anything from you beyond work and collaboration. If all we ever are is business partners and friends, that is more than enough. I am not Marcus. I am not going to hurt you or pressure you or expect anything you are not willing to give freely. Do you understand? She searched his face for any hint of deception, any shadow of ulterior motive, but found only sincerity. Slowly, she nodded. Good, he said, standing up. Now, since we are trapped inside for another day at least, why do you not tell me about your mother's boarding house? I want to hear about how you ran things. So she did. She told him about the careful balancing of accounts, about learning which guests would pay on time and which needed gentle reminders, about the satisfaction of turning a struggling business into a profitable one. As she talked, she felt something inside her begin to unfurl, some long-buried part of herself that had been suffocated under Marcus's control. Kieran listened intently, asking thoughtful questions, treating her ideas and experiences as valuable. It was such a simple thing, being listened to and respected, but after years of being silenced and diminished, it felt like a revelation. That night, Violet lay in bed listening to the wind outside and thought about futures instead of pasts. It was a small shift, but it felt monumental. The blizzard finally broke on the fourth day, leaving the world outside transformed into a glittering white landscape. Kieran went out to check on the ranch and ensure the livestock had weathered the storm while Violet watched from the cabin window, her bandaged feet still too tender to walk far. He moved with confidence through the deep snow, a man completely at ease in his environment, and she found herself studying him with new eyes. He was handsome, she realized, in a rugged, unpolished way. Not pretty like the gamblers and dandies who frequented Marcus's establishment, but solid and real. There was something deeply appealing about the way he carried himself, about the quiet competence in everything he did. When he returned to the cabin, stomping snow off his boots, his cheeks red from the cold, she felt a small flutter in her chest that she had not felt in years. "Everything survived," he reported, hanging his coat by the door. "Lost some fence posts, but nothing that cannot be fixed. How are your feet?" "Better," she said, flexing her toes experimentally. "Still sore, but healing." "Good. We should check the bandages, make sure there is no infection." She sat down and let him unwrap her feet, watching as he examined the wounds with careful attention. His hands were gentle despite their size and calluses, and she found herself noticing the way his dark hair fell across his forehead, the concentration in his eyes, the line of his jaw. "Stop it," she told herself firmly. "This man has shown you nothing but kindness. Do not ruin it by developing feelings that will only complicate everything." But her heart did not seem interested in listening to logic. "They look good," Kieran said, rewrapping her feet with clean bandages. "You are healing well. Another week or so and you should be able to walk normally." "Kieran," she said as he finished, "I have made my decision about your offer." He looked up at her, his expression carefully neutral. "And?" "I want to stay. I want to try being partners, building this ranch together." She took a deep breath. "But I need you to promise me something." "Anything." "If I ask you to take me to Sacramento, to your friend Catherine, you will do it. No arguments, no trying to change my mind. If I decide I need to leave, you will let me go." "I promise," he said without hesitation. "You are free to leave any time you want. You're not a prisoner here, Violet. You are a partner and a guest, and someday, I hope, a friend." "Friend, Srpmer," she repeated, testing the word. "I would like that." He smiled at her then, a real smile that reached his eyes and transformed his serious face into something warm and open. "Then friends it is, partners and friends. Now, if you're feeling up to it, I would love to show you the ranch books and get your thoughts on how we can improve things." They spent the rest of the day huddled over ledgers and papers, Violet's sharp mind quickly identifying inefficiencies and opportunities that Kieran had missed. It felt good to use her brain again, to be valued for her intelligence and skills rather than her appearance. They worked well together, she realized, falling into an easy rhythm of discussion and planning. As the sun set and Kieran lit the lamps, Violet felt something she had not felt in years. Hope. Maybe, just maybe, she could build a new life here. Maybe she could learn to trust again, to be herself again. Maybe running barefoot through that snow had not been the end of her story, but the beginning of a new chapter. Over the following weeks, as winter slowly loosened its grip on the Sierra foothills, Violet healed in both body and spirit. Her feet mended, the physical scars fading to pale lines across her soles. The deeper scars took longer, but in the quiet safety of the ranch, she began to find herself again. She discovered that she loved the work of managing the ranch accounts, the challenge of making efficient use of limited resources. She learned to ride horses, something she had never done before, and found unexpected joy in the freedom of galloping across open land. Kieran was true to his word in every way. He treated her as an equal partner, consulting her on decisions, respecting her opinions, never making her feel less than or controlled. He was also careful with her physical space, never touching her unless necessary, always maintaining a respectful distance. Violet appreciated his caution even as a part of her. A part that grew stronger each day wished he would come closer. She found herself noticing things about him. The way he hummed softly when he was working on repairs around the ranch. The kindness in how he treated the animals. The rare, beautiful smile that appeared when something genuinely pleased him. The way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he laughed, which was happening more often as Violet relaxed enough to joke and tease him. One evening in early March, they were sitting on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of gold and rose. The air was finally warming, spring beginning to assert itself. Violet wrapped her shawl around her shoulders and said, "I have been thinking." "Dangerous pastime," Kieran teased gently. She smiled. "I want to expand the cattle operation. I've been going through the accounts, and we have enough saved to purchase another 20 head if we are smart about it. We could sell them in Sacramento come fall and double our investment." "That is ambitious," Kieran said, but she could hear the interest in his voice. "We did not come west to play it safe," Violet said. "If we are going to make this ranch into something significant, we need to take calculated risks." He turned to look at her, and there was something in his expression that made her breath catch. "When did it become we? When did you start thinking of this as your ranch, too?" "Is that not what partners do?" she asked. "Think in terms of we?" "It is," he said quietly. "I'm just glad you feel that way. That you are thinking of this as home." Home. The word settled over her like a warm blanket. When had this place become home? When had Kieran become more than just the stranger who saved her life? She could not pinpoint the exact moment, but she knew it was true. This ranch, this life, this man, they had become hers in a way that nothing ever had before. "Kieran," she said, her heart pounding, "can I ask you something?" "Always." "Do you ever think about me as more than a business partner?" The silence that followed her question stretched long enough that she began to regret asking. Then Kieran said very carefully, "Every single day." Violet turned to look at him fully and saw the truth written plainly on his face. He cared for her, perhaps more than cared, but he had been holding back, giving her space, not wanting to pressure her. "Why did you never say anything?" she asked a demurrer. "Because you needed time. Because you needed to feel safe without worrying about my feelings or expectations. Because I would rather have you in my life as just a friend than risk losing you by asking for more before you were ready." He looked at her then, his dark eyes full of emotion. "Are you ready, Violet? Because if you are not, we can forget this conversation ever happened. Nothing has to change." "Everything has already changed," she said softly. "I think it changed the moment you wrapped your coat around me and told me I was safe. I think I started falling for you that very first night, and I've been fighting it ever since because I was terrified." "Terrified of what?" "Of being hurt again, of losing this new life I am building, of not being enough for you." She took a shaky breath. "Marcus did terrible things, Kieran. He made me feel worthless and broken. I do not know if I can be what a man like you deserves." Kieran stood and held out his hand to her. After a moment's hesitation, she took it, letting him pull her to her feet. He kept hold of her hand, his thumb tracing gentle circles on her palm. "You are not broken," he said firmly, "and you are more than enough. You are smart and brave and stronger than anyone I have ever met. What Marcus did to you was not your fault, and it does not define you." His free hand came up to cup her face, his touch feather light, giving her every opportunity to pull away. "I am falling in love with you, Violet Ashford. I have been falling since that night in the snow, and if you will let me, I would like to spend the rest of my life showing you exactly how extraordinary you are." Tears streamed down Violet's face, But for once they were not tears of pain or fear. They were tears of relief, of joy, of coming home to herself and to this man who saw her so clearly. "I am scared," she whispered. "I know. We will go slow as you need." "What if I can never be completely whole? What if the things Marcus did leave me too damaged?" "Then we will work through it together. There is no timeline, no expectation. Just you and me, figuring it out one day at a time." He leaned forward, his forehead resting gently against hers. "I am not going anywhere, Violet. You're stuck with me." She laughed through her tears, a sound of pure happiness that surprised her with its intensity. "Kiss me," she said. "Please kiss me." He did so gently that it made her heart ache. His lips brushed against hers softly, a question and a promise all at once. Violet leaned into him, letting herself feel safe and cherished and wanted in all the right ways. When they finally pulled apart, she was smiling. "That was nice," she said, a little breathlessly. "It was," he agreed, his own smile wide and genuine. "We can do it again sometime if you would like. I would like that very much." They stood there on the porch, holding each other as the last light faded from the sky, and Violet felt something inside her shift and settle. This was right. This was real. This was the life she was meant to have. But their peace was not destined to last. 2 weeks later, on a bright spring morning when Violet was in the barn checking on a mare about to foal, she heard the sound of horses approaching. Multiple horses moving fast. She stepped out of the barn to see Kieran already walking toward the house, his hand resting on the gun at his hip. A group of 6 men rode into the yard, and Violet's blood turned to ice when she saw who led them. Marcus Brennan sat astride a black horse, his face still showing the burn scars from where she had hit him with the lamp. His eyes swept the ranch and landed on her with an expression of cold fury. "There she is," Marcus said, his voice carrying across the yard. "My property, living quite comfortably on another man's ranch. How enterprising of you, Violet." Kieran stepped between Marcus and Violet, his body language deceptively relaxed. "This is private property. State your business or leave." Marcus laughed, a harsh sound devoid of humor. "My business is with that woman. She belongs to me, and I am here to collect what is mine." "She does not belong to anyone," Kieran said, his voice hard as stone. "She is a free woman, and she is staying right here." "Is that so?" Marcus dismounted, his men following suit. They were all armed, all watching Kieran with the predatory attention of men accustomed to violence. "I have a legal contract signed by her father transferring ownership of all debts to me. That includes her. The law is on my side, Cowboy." "The law does not recognize ownership of human beings," Kieran said. "And even if your contract was legal, which it is not, Violet is an adult woman entitled to make her own choices. She chooses to stay here." "Violet does not get to choose anything," Marcus said, his eyes fixed on her. "Violet is a whore and a thief who stole from me and tried to burn down my establishment. She is coming back with me to face the consequences." Violet felt her legs shaking, but forced herself to step forward, to stand beside Kieran rather than behind him. "I am not going anywhere with you, Marcus. I am done being your victim." Marcus's expression darkened. "You do not have a choice. Either you come peacefully, or my men will drag you back, and your cowboy friend here will be lying dead in his own yard. Is that what you want?" "Leave," Kieran said, his hand moving to his gun. "Leave now while you still can." 6 against 1, Marcus observed. "I do not like your odds." "Then you are not paying attention," said a new voice. Everyone turned to see 3 riders approaching from the north. As they got closer, Violet recognized them as neighboring ranchers, men she had met once or twice when Kieran had taken her to town for supplies. They rode into the yard and took positions flanking Kieran, their own hands resting on their weapons. "Seems like the odds just changed," said the oldest of the 3, a grizzled man named John Carmichael. We heard you had some unwelcome visitors, Nash. Thought you might appreciate some backup. Much appreciated, John, Kieran said, relief evident in his voice. Marcus looked around at the assembled men, his jaw tight with frustration. This is not over. I have legal rights. Then take it to a judge, John Carmichael said. But you are not taking any woman off this property by force. Not today, not ever. The law in Placerville answers to me, Marcus threatened. Good thing we are not in Placerville, Kieran said. This is my land, and the law here answers to me. You want to press your case? Go to Sacramento, file your claim, and we will see what a real judge has to say about your contract. Until then, get off my property. Marcus stared at Violet for a long moment, and she saw the calculation in his eyes. He was weighing his options, trying to decide if this was worth the fight. Finally, he remounted his horse. This is not finished, he said. You cannot hide here forever, Violet. Eventually, you will have to come to town. And when you do, I will be waiting. Then I guess you will be waiting a long time, Violet said, finding her voice, because I am never coming back to you. You can spend the rest of your life waiting for something that will never happen. Marcus's face twisted with rage, but he jerked his horse around and rode off, his men following. They watched until the group had disappeared from sight, and only then did Kieran let out a long breath. Thank you, he said to the other ranchers. I owe you all. No dead among neighbors, John Carmichael said. Word got around about what this girl escaped from. No decent man would let Brennan take her back to that. He tipped his hat to Violet. You are welcome on any of our properties, miss. If you ever need help, you just ask. After the neighbors had left, Kieran and Violet stood in the yard, the adrenaline slowly draining from their systems. Violet was shaking, and Kieran pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. I am sorry, she said into his chest. I brought this trouble to you. No, he said firmly. Marcus brought this trouble, not you, never you. He pulled back to look at her face. Are you all right? I am angry, she said, surprised by the emotion. I am so angry that he still thinks he can control me, that he still believes I belong to him. I am angry that he can just ride onto our land and threaten us and think he has any right to do so. Good, Kieran said. Hold on to that anger. Let it make you strong, not afraid. What if he comes back? Then we will deal with it. Together. You are not alone in this anymore, Violet. You have me, and you have neighbors who will stand with you. Marcus is a bully, and bullies back down when they realize their targets are not as helpless as they thought. Violet nodded, drawing strength from his certainty. Will he really take it to a judge? Maybe, but if he does, he will lose. That contract is not worth the paper it is written on. Debt bondage is illegal even in California. Any judge worth his salt would throw the case out. Kieran brushed a strand of hair from her face. You are safe, Violet. I promise you are safe. That night, as they lay in bed together, fully clothed and just holding each other, Violet thought about how much her life had changed in just a few months. She had gone from being property to being a partner, from being controlled to being free, from being alone to being cherished. And she had found love in the most unexpected place, with a man who had caught her when she was running barefoot through the snow and told her she was safe. Kieran, she whispered into the darkness. Yes? I love you. I should have said it before, but I was scared. I am still scared, but I love you, and I needed you to know. She felt him shift beside her, his arms tightening around her. I love you too, Violet, more than I have words to express. They fell asleep wrapped in each other, and for the first time since childhood, Violet slept without nightmares. The following months brought challenges and triumphs in equal measure. True to his word, Marcus filed a legal claim in Sacramento, but just as Kieran had predicted, the judge dismissed it immediately, citing the illegality of debt bondage and noting that Violet had every right to refuse to return to an employer. The judge also issued a formal warning to Marcus about harassment, making it clear that any further attempts to force Violet back to his establishment would result in charges. With that threat finally resolved, Violet threw herself into building the ranch with renewed energy. She and Kieran worked side by side from dawn to dusk, expanding the herd, improving the land, building additional structures. They made a formidable team, her business acumen complementing his practical skills perfectly. The ranch flourished under their joint management, and word began to spread about the quality of their cattle. Their relationship deepened as well, slowly and carefully, with Violet setting the pace. There were moments when the ghosts of her past rose up to haunt her, times when a casual touch or an innocent comment would trigger memories that left her shaking. Kieran was endlessly patient, never pushing, always giving her the space and time she needed to work through her trauma. He held her through nightmares and panic attacks, never making her feel weak or broken, always reminding her how strong she was. 1 year after the night he had found her running barefoot through the snow, Kieran proposed. They were out on the range, checking on the cattle, when he dismounted and pulled her down from her horse to stand beside him. "Violet Ashford," he said, taking both her hands in his, "you have made this past year the best of my life. You have made this ranch a home and made me happier than I ever thought possible. I know we have not done things in a traditional order, but I do not care about tradition. I care about you, and I care about building a life together that is ours on our terms. So I am asking you, will you marry me? Will you be my wife, my partner, my equal in all things?" Violet looked at this man who had saved her life in every way possible, who had shown her what real love looked like, who had given her back herself. "Yes," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, I will marry you, Kieran Nash." He kissed her then, deep and passionate, and she kissed him back with all the love and trust and hope she had rebuilt inside herself. When they finally pulled apart, they were both grinning like fools. They married a month later in a simple ceremony at the ranch, with their neighbors as witnesses and a traveling preacher officiating. Violet wore a dress of pale blue that she had made herself, and Kieran wore his best suit, looking handsomer than she had ever seen him. As they spoke their vows, Violet felt the final pieces of her broken self clicking back into place. She was no longer running from her past. She was standing still, rooted in this place and this love, ready to build a future. Their wedding night was tender and careful, Kieran's patience and love giving Violet the courage to let go of the last of her fear. For the first time, physical intimacy was not about control or pain, but about connection and joy. Afterward, as they lay tangled together in the darkness, Violet felt a completeness she had never known before. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For catching me that night. For seeing me, really seeing me, and believing I was worth saving." "Violet, you saved yourself, Noressors," Kieran said seriously. "You were the one who fought back, who ran, who had the courage to escape. I just gave you a safe place to land. Everything after that, all the healing and growing and building, that was all you." "We did it together," Violet insisted. "That is what partners do." "Yes," he agreed, kissing her forehead. "That is what partners do." The years that followed were not always easy. The ranch faced droughts and harsh winters, cattle thieves and market fluctuations, but Violet and Kieran faced every challenge together, their partnership only growing stronger with time. They expanded the ranch significantly, eventually becoming one of the most successful operations in the region. Violet's skill at managing the business side earned her a reputation as a shrewd negotiator, and ranchers from across California sought her advice. 3 years into their marriage, Violet gave birth to their first child, a son they named William. She had been terrified during her pregnancy, afraid that the traumas of her past would somehow affect her ability to be a good mother. But the moment she held William in her arms, she knew that fear was unfounded. She loved him with a fierce, protective intensity that surprised her with its strength. 2 years later, twin girls arrived, Emma and Grace, filling their home with laughter and chaos. Kieran proved to be a devoted father, patient and loving, teaching their children the values of hard work and kindness. Violet watched him play with the babies, marveling at how gentle such strong hands could be, and fell in love with him all over again. One evening, when William was 5 and the twins were 3, the family sat on the porch watching the sunset. The children were chasing fireflies in the yard, their delighted giggles floating on the warm summer air. Kieran had his arm around Violet, and she leaned into him contentedly. "Do you ever think about that night?" he asked quietly. "The night I found you?" "Sometimes," Violet admitted. "It feels like a lifetime ago, like it happened to a different person, but I'm grateful for it in a strange way. If I had not run that night, if you had not caught me, I would not have this life. I would not have you or the children or the ranch. All the pain I went through led me here to this moment, and I would not trade this for anything." "You are extraordinary," Kieran said, kissing the top of her head. "Do you know that?" "I am just someone who got very lucky," Violet said. "No. You are someone who had the courage to save herself and who had the strength to build something beautiful from the ashes of her past. That is not luck. That is character." William came running up to the porch then, breathless and excited. "Mama, Papa, look what I caught." He opened his small hands to reveal a firefly glowing softly in his palms. "Make a wish and let it go," Violet told him, as her own mother had once told her. William closed his eyes tight, his face scrunched in concentration, then opened his hands. The firefly rose into the air, blinking its light as it flew away into the gathering dusk. "What did you wish for?" Kieran asked. "Cannot tell," William said seriously. "Then it will not come true. But it was a good wish." As their son ran back to his sisters, Violet reflected on wishes and luck and the strange paths that lead us to where we are meant to be. She had wished for freedom once, running barefoot through the snow with death at her heels. That wish had come true in ways she never could have imagined. "What are you thinking?" Kieran asked. "That I am happy," Violet said simply. "Completely, fully happy. And I never thought I would be able to say that." "Neither did I," Kieran admitted. "Before you, I was just going through the motions, building a ranch, but not really living. You taught me what it means to truly live, to truly love." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their children play as darkness fell and the stars began to emerge. The ranch stretched out around them, the land they had built together, the home they had made. In the distance, Violet could see lights from their neighbors' ranches, the community that had welcomed her and stood by her side. Years continued to pass, bringing more children, 2 more sons, and eventually grandchildren. The ranch prospered under their continued management, becoming a legacy they would pass on to their children. Violet never forgot where she had come from, the darkness she had escaped, but it no longer defined her. She was no longer the terrified young woman running barefoot through the snow. She was Violet Nash, rancher, mother, wife, and partner in all things. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Kieran took Violet out to the same spot on the range where he had proposed. The children were grown now, William managing much of the ranch's daily operations, the twins married and starting families of their own, the younger boys still learning the business. It was just the 2 of them on this golden afternoon, like it had been in the beginning. 20 years, Kieran said, pulling her close. Best 20 years of my life. Mine too, Violet said, resting her head against his chest and listening to the steady beat of his heart, the same heart that had led him to stop that night when he heard someone running through the snow. "Do you know what I think about sometimes?" Kieran asked. "What?" "How easily I might have missed you that night. If I'd been riding a different route, if the snow had been coming down harder, if I'd been just a few minutes earlier or later, we might never have met. Our entire life together hinges on that one moment of chance." "I do not think it was chance," Violet said. "I think it was meant to be. I think the universe brought us together exactly when we both needed it most. You needed to fulfill the promise you made to your sister, and I needed someone who would see me as more than broken. We saved each other, Kieran." He kissed her then, as passionately as he had on their wedding day, and she kissed him back with all the love that 20 years together had built. When they finally pulled apart, they were both smiling. "Let us go home," Kieran said. Our family will be arriving soon for the anniversary dinner." They rode back to the ranch house side by side, as they had done countless times over the past 2 decades. The house had grown over the years, expanded to accommodate their large family, but it still felt like the same safe haven it had been that first night. As they approached, they could see William on the porch with his wife, the twins arriving in their wagons with their husbands and children, the younger boys helping to prepare for the celebration. This was the life Violet had built from nothing, from bare feet in the snow and terror that felt endless. This was what survival looked like, what healing looked like, what love looked like. She had run from her past, and Kieran had caught her and told her she was safe. He had been right. She was safe, and more than that, she was home. As the years went by, Violet and Kieran became pillars of their community, known not just for their successful ranch, but for their kindness and generosity. They helped neighbors in need, took in people who had nowhere else to go, and taught their children the importance of standing up for those who could not stand up for themselves. The ranch became a place of refuge, just as it had once been a refuge for Violet. On the night of their 30th anniversary, as they lay in bed together, Kieran reached for Violet's hand in the darkness. "Tell me something," he said. "Anything. Are you still happy? After all these years, after all the hardships and challenges, are you still happy?" Violet thought about the question seriously. She thought about the struggles they had faced, the difficult calving seasons and harsh winters, the financial pressures and the physical toll of working the land. She thought about the pain of watching their children make mistakes and face their own hardships. She thought about the scars she still carried, both visible and invisible, from her time with Marcus. But then she thought about everything else. The laughter that filled their home, the pride of watching their children grow into strong, good people, the satisfaction of building something lasting and meaningful, the comfort of lying beside someone who knew her completely and loved her anyway, the simple, profound joy of being free. "Yes," she said firmly, "I am still happy. I will always be happy as long as I have you." "You will always have me," Kieran promised. "In this life and whatever comes after, you and me, partners until the end." "Partners until the end," Violet agreed, and fell asleep in his arms, safe and loved and home. They were blessed with long lives, living to see their grandchildren grow and even meeting a few great-grandchildren. The ranch continued to thrive under the management of their children and grandchildren, the Nash name becoming synonymous with quality and integrity in the cattle business. Through it all, Violet and Kieran remained devoted to each other, their love deepening with each passing year rather than fading. When Kieran finally passed at the age of 78, with Violet holding his hand and their children gathered around his bed, his last words were, "You made me so happy, Violet. Thank you for letting me catch you that night." Violet grieved him deeply, but she did not break. She had learned long ago that she was stronger than her pain, that love and loss were two sides of the same coin. She lived another 5 years after Kieran's death, spending her time with her children and grandchildren, passing on the stories of how their ranch began, of a cowboy who had saved a woman running barefoot through the snow, of how love could heal even the deepest wounds. On a spring evening much like the one when Kieran had proposed, Violet sat on the porch of the ranch house surrounded by her family. She was 84 years old, her hair white but her mind still sharp, her hands weathered but still strong. As she looked out over the land she and Kieran had built together, she felt a deep sense of peace. "Tell us the story again, Grandma," one of the great-grandchildren asked. "Tell us how you and Grandpa met." So Violet told the story one more time. She told them about running barefoot through the snow, about the cowboy who had caught her and said she was safe, about building a life from nothing but courage and love. She told them about choosing happiness, about healing, about the extraordinary power of two people committed to building something good together. As she spoke, the sun set over the mountains, painting the sky in brilliant colors, and Violet felt Kieran's presence beside her as surely as if he were still alive. She had run from her past 60 years ago, terrified and broken, and he had caught her. He had given her safety and freedom and love, and together they had built a legacy that would endure for generations. The story ended, as all stories must, but the love remained. It remained in the land they had built, in the children and grandchildren who carried on their work, in the values they had lived and taught. Violet Ashford Nash closed her eyes that night, surrounded by family, and when she passed peacefully in her sleep, it was with a smile on her face. She was buried beside Kieran on a hill overlooking the ranch, under a sky full of stars. The headstone was simple, bearing both their names and a single line, "Partners until the end and beyond." And in the years that followed, when Nash family members gathered at the ranch, they would tell the story of the woman who ran barefoot through the snow and the cowboy who caught her, of how love can save us and how we can save ourselves, of how the worst moments of our lives can lead to the very best if we have the courage to keep running towards something better. The ranch still stands today, managed by the 7th generation of Nash descendants, a testament to what two people built from nothing but determination and love. And on cold winter nights when the snow falls on the Sierra foothills, some swear they can see two figures on horseback riding through the ranch, side by side as they always were, partners eternal in the land they made their own.